Hello, my name is Rickard. Welcome to my channel. In today's tutorial, we're going to recreate the Moonlight poster. And if you want to follow along, go ahead and in the description, I've put all the assets that you need. I've also put a link to the original poster so you can download that for reference. Let's get started. All right. So the first thing we're going to do is create new, and we want to create a new document. Normally I just go to photo and pick the default size, but in this case we're going to create a movie poster. A movie poster is 24 inches wide by 35 inches high. So we're going to make the width 24 inches. We're going to make the height 35 inches. For this tutorial, I don't need this print quality. Print resolution is 300, but in this case, I'm going to make it 72. We want it to be RGB color, and the rest we can leave on default. And let's call this poster. Go ahead and save that. Poster. Oh, we'll call this movie poster. And let's go ahead and save that preset. There you go. So now we have our own preset there. And let's hit create. Okay, the next thing I want to do is set up some guides. So I'm going to go to View, New Guide Layout. I've already set this up, so I'm going to go ahead and set this to default, and we'll walk through it real quick. For columns, I want 4, and I don't want any gutter. And for rows, I also want 4 with no gutter. And for the margin, I don't want any left or right margin, but I do want a top margin of 180 and a bottom margin of 385. And that's going to dictate where we put our text. So let's hit OK. All right, now the poster we're going to recreate is the Moonlight poster. So the first thing I want to do is copy the gradients out of this image. So to do that, what I'm going to do is go on the eyedropper tool, and a gradient is created with your foreground color on one side and your background color on the other side. So what I want to do is I want to take these colors here, and I want to select the darkest part of the image and the lightest part of the image to set my gradient. So let's go ahead and make sure we have our sample size to 3.3. You don't want it on point sample. Point sample selects 1 pixel. Now if we zoom in here, you can see that there's noise. So if I pick this sample, I'm going to get a magenta color, whereas if I pick this one, I'm going to get a more blue color. So for our purposes, let's do 5 by 5 average. Now when I click here, it's going to average 5 pixels. So let's go ahead and pick our darkest color, which is right about there. And then I'm going to hit X to switch these two, and then select the lightest color, which is here. And now because I want the gradient to go from dark to light, I'm going to switch these colors again with X, and then I'm going to go here and hit gradient map. Now I want to save this gradient map, so I'm going to click on this little down menu here, and then click here and click on new gradient, and we'll call this Blue Moonlight Gradient. And I realize I'm spelling Moonlight wrong. Let's hit OK. All right, now we can go ahead and throw that one away because we're not going to use it quite yet. And put our Properties tab back here. Next, we're going to do the magenta one. So same thing, I'm going to select the darkest color, hit X, and then select the lightest color. Now you can see here that this actually goes to white. And I don't want that because this one does not go to white, and neither does this one. So the middle one shouldn't go to white either. So let's, and you can also tell this image is quite a bit more noisy. So I'm going to go to a 3.3 sample and kind of, the top of your ring shows the color that you're selecting. So I kind of want to make sure I'm selecting a pretty light. So I'm going to move my mouse around, look at what I'm getting there until I get that kind of light pink color. And I might even move around to here, looking for a spot that's a relatively light pink color there. Probably right around there. Good, now I'm going to hit X again so that I'm going from dark to light. And we're going to make our gradient map. Click on this, click here, new gradient, and we're going to call this one Magenta Moonlight. All right, and then let's throw that away. And next, we're going to do the purple. So here we're going to again select the darkest color, hit X, and select the lightest color, and then hit X again so it goes from dark to light, and back to gradient map, and again do the same thing. We'll call this one Purple Moonlight Gradient. Good. All right, and I'm going to close this now and not save. All right. Now that I have my gradients, we're going to start pulling in images here. Now, if you look at the original Moonlight poster, you'll notice that they obviously took those photos with one camera, with one lighting setup, with all faces in exactly the same pose. So they have an advantage of that we don't have. But we're going to do the best we can with what we have. So let's go place embedded. And the image, actually before I start placing the images, what I want to do is create the lines. So let's go ahead and go on our shape tool. Actually, I'm going to go on the pen tool, and up here I'm going to change it from path to shape. Shape is often the default, so if it is already, you don't have to change it. And I'm going to select just a light gray color is fine. I don't want any stroke. Okay, and back to pen. All right, so now we're going to start from this corner and then hold down shift so we're making a straight line, and I'm going to go just past this guide there and then down to right about the middle there. Whoops. And this time I'm not going to hold shift. This time I am, because I want a straight line, and back to there. All right, so now we have that shape there. And for some reason it did not make a shape. All right, so let's hit shape. There you go. Now it's made it a shape. And we'll call this left image. And now let's put it on shape so it makes a shape right away. This time I'm going to start from this corner. Click. And then go a little bit past this guide here. And then down to right about there. I want it to kind of intersect that X right there. And there you go. And if we need to adjust this after the fact, we can just go on the direct selection tool, which is A, and you can click on these anchor points. Because it's a shape, you can move them. You can select individual anchor points and move them. So let's call this right image. All right, now I'm going to place embedded, and we're going to take the first image, which is this KS30, and let's make him significantly bigger. And I'm going to rotate him a bit. And I want his eye to be, that's about where I want his eye. So I'm going to move my anchor point to that. So when I scale and transform, it keeps that eye in that same spot. That looks pretty good. All right, now we're going to go File, Place, Embed again. This time we're going to take this image here, 3253, and let's expand that. I want to change the opacity to 50%, and I can do that by hitting 5 on the keyboard. And now what I want to do is line up this eye here. So as you can see, as I'm moving it, you can see both layers. So I can line up that eye, then do Command T for transform, move my anchor point again, and adjust that so that the face is pretty much in the same place there. I'm looking at the mouth, I'm looking at the nose. Because they're at slightly different focal lengths, the eyes on one is a bit different. And I'm not really trying to line up the eyes so much as the left side of the face and also where this ear lands. I kind of want that to be my reference point, not so much this eye, because we're going to be cutting that out in the middle. So that looks pretty good. Let's hit OK there. And then finally, now with these, I can hit 0 to take my opacity back to 100. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this one here, put it above right image, and then by holding down Option and clicking between the layers, I'm going to clip that. And I'm going to do the same with this one, clip it like that. So there you go, we've now split it. And then finally, I'm going to select the background, do File, Place Embedded, and take my last image and place that there, and I'm going to expand this until this part of the eye there matches. Put that there, a little bit there, so about there. Put my anchor point there, so when I move it around, it adjusts to that. And to zoom in and out, I'm holding down Command and the space bar. All right, now I'm going to hold this and get those mouths to line up. So right about there, and we're getting a pretty good lineup on the eye as well. And I want that eye split in half. That's how it is in the original Moonlight poster. So now what I can do is I can take my man up here and just adjust him to get that eye lining up. Now you'll notice that the eye on this guy is smaller. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn these layers off, and on this guy, right now it's a smart object. I don't need it to be. I have it basically where I want it in terms of shape. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to rasterize this layer, and then right now if you do Command T, you can see this layer is much bigger than the space. So I could crop the image, but I find the easiest way is to just select all and then do Command J and then throw away your old layer. So now I have him cropped to the size of our canvas there. And that's going to help when you do like Liquify or transforms. Instead of working with the whole image, you're just working with what you need. All right, so now what we're going to do is go to Filter, Liquify. And what I want to do is I want to make this eye bigger. Now we can do that just with this tool here, which is the expand tool. Just kind of make it a bit bigger. You can see if you scroll down here whether you want to show backdrop or not. If I turn that off, I'm just going to see the results. So let's go ahead and do that. And make sure you're hitting right in the center of the pupil so that you're not distorting the circular shape of the pupil. So there you go. That's about right. We're not using this eye, so I'm not worried about that. Let's hit OK. There you go. Let's turn these layers back on. And if we zoom in here, we can see that's pretty nicely lined up there. I'm primarily looking at this pupil here. I could try to move this down just a little bit, but I feel like that's going to distort the shape of the pupil, so I'm not really going to worry about that. All right, the other thing you can see is this jawline. We need to move it up so it better matches this shape. So let's go ahead and select that layer. I'm going to do the same thing. Command A, Command J. Throw away the original and just put that in there. That way I won't have to work with as much when I go into Liquify. Oh, let's Command Z that and go down to Liquify. Alright, and in this case I do want to show the backdrop so I can see where the other jawline is. I'm going to go on this, which is the push tool. I hold down Control and Option to make my brush bigger. Just push that jawline up about there so it matches better with the jawline underneath, which you can kind of see there. Some guide, and let's see how this, there you go, that's pretty good. Alright, and we probably want to move this nose down just a bit, so let's go back to this guy, back to Liquify, and make the brush a bit smaller and just push this nose down a little bit. And also I want to take this eyebrow here and just push it up. I'm going to try to do that without messing with the eye so much, even though we're only seeing this little corner of the eye, so it's not super crucial. Just try to get that eyebrow lining up a bit better. So it blends a bit better there. That's not too bad. And maybe move this eyebrow down a bit. So let's go ahead onto this one here. Go back to Liquify. And let's push this a bit. And when you're using the Liquify tool, you don't want to overdo it because then you're going to start to see stretched pixels. But that's not bad. It's a little more aligned in terms of the images. And what I can also do here to get this nose, because the bottom of the lip can move down a bit too, is I can also just use the transform, which is Command T, and click on this tool here and just click on the warp and then just pull this area down and then pull this area a little bit back up. It's not the greatest of control, but it does allow you to adjust two areas of the image independently. And if you want to go really more detailed, use the puppet warp tool. But for our purposes, we don't need to do that. Okay. Okay, so I think we've got our images lined up well enough. Now what I need to do is just paint in some of this. Now I'm going to blur it heavily, so I'm not too concerned about it. Again, on this, I want to just cut out. So I'm going to do Command A again, Command J, throw this one away, and then group that. And then on this layer, I'm going to go on B for my brush tool. And I'm just going to paint in. What we'll do actually is use the pen tool, put it on path, and then we're just going to kind of fake in this shirt here. So we're going to go like this. And because we're going to be blurring this heavily, I'm not super concerned about how well it lines up. So let's go ahead and right mouse click to make a selection out of our path. And let's put this on 0.5. Just want a little bit of radius there. And then I'm going to go back on the brush tool, hold down Option, which puts me on the eyedropper, so I can select the color I want, and then I can just paint it. And that looks good enough. Let's hit Command D to get rid of our selection. And you can see here that I'm not totally to the bottom there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select my right image crop there and just pull that down a little bit. Hit OK. There you go. All right, so we now have pretty much our elements in place. Now what we're going to do is apply our color gradients. Actually, one thing I want to do before that is just define the jawline a bit better. because it's not very well defined here or here, and it's going to help us when we're blurring it to have a slightly better defined jawline. So let's go back, P for the pen tool. I'm going to turn off the gradients, which is Command semicolon, and then just draw in the jawline here. I want the jawline defined all the way through to here. There we go. Let's hit right mouse click, make selection. In this case, I'm going to make my feather a bit larger. I'm going to go 5 pixels. And then what I'm going to do is just select create a new layer, group that to this one, go on my brush tool, hit D to default my colors, hit X to make my foreground color white there, paint in a little bit here like that. I'm going to overdo it a bit and then just take the opacity down. Actually, what I can do is put it on overlay. A little more real. And then let's invert our selection, so we're selecting the jaw as opposed to under the jaw. Inverse, which is Shift Command I. Add another layer here and just paint this part of the jawline here like that. You can also do just a little bit on this side as well. And then I'm going to take that layer and put it on overlay. That's pretty good. Slightly better defined jawline. It's a little strong here, so I'm going to put a mask on there. Go back on my brush tool, make sure I've got black selected, and just paint that out a little bit there. There you go. Good. All right, so now what I want to do is make a new layer. We're going to call this Merged. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold down Shift, Option, Command E, and that's going to pull everything onto a single layer. Now, actually, before I do that, I want to adjust the lightness and darkness of this middle image to be a little bit closer to the other two. So I'm going to select this back layer here, go here and go Curves, and then just pull the curve down there. I'm not so worried about color because we're going to be adding our gradient maps on top. So I'm mainly just looking at contrast and darkness. And that looks pretty good. All right, so now let's do our new layer. Let's call that Merged. Shift, Option, Command E. Okay, so now we have everything on one layer. Now what I want to do is go to Filter, Blur Gallery, and pick Iris Blur. And what Iris Blur does is it keeps the middle in focus and blurs everything outside of it. So you can see here I've kind of already shaped it. The default is usually like a, well here, let's reset it. So that's kind of your default, is the circle. So let's put the circle there, and what we're going to do is stretch the edges so it's kind of the shape of his face, and then turn it so that it's the same angle as this shape. And I want his eyes to be in focus and kind of through to his jaw to be somewhat in focus, but everything outside, including out here, I want to be out of focus. And I can adjust the focus here, and I can also adjust it over here. So let's put it on about 20 pixels. Let's hit OK. You can see this is still too in focus. So what we're going to do is we're going to do Blur Gallery again, but this time we're going to go to Field Blur. And what Field Blur does is it makes the area where you've put your point blurry, but then if you put another point somewhere else in the image and change the blurriness of that, it'll figure out the difference between the two, and I'll show you in a sec. So this I want on 0 blur. And then this eye I also want on 0 blur. And I want his mouth on 0 blur. Right, so those are kind of the 3 spots I want to stay in focus. But over here, I want a lot of blur. So I'm going to go like all the way to 45 and do that also over here all the way to, well, let's not quite do 45. Let's do 40. And let's hit OK. Okay, so now that is a lot more blurry down here. And then what I want to do is just add some vignetting. So let's call this layer vignette. I'm going to go on the gradient tool, which is G. I'm going to go on the linear gradient, and I want my gradient to be this one, foreground to transparent. That way, whatever my foreground color is what it's going to use to then go to transparent. In this case, I wanted black, so I'm going to hit D for defaults, and then just pull in a little bit of gradient here, kind of from the top like this, from the bottom. So about like that. That looks pretty good. All right, and then we're going to start doing our gradient maps. So now, on our gradient maps, we're going to have to divide them. Now, because we've already made this left image and right image, we have what we need to make our selections. If I hold down Command, I'm going to select the transparency of that layer. So let's go ahead and click that one. Now that's selected, that transparency. And then I'm going to go to Gradient Map. And this one we want to be purple. So I'm going to click here and you'll see the ones we saved down here. So let's go ahead and click our purple one there. And then for the left slat, I'm going to select the left slat, but you'll see it's overlapping here. So by holding Command and then Option, I can minus this transparency off of that one. So let's go back to Gradient Map. Click here, and this one we want to be our blue color. And finally, the last one is going to be the space in between. So what I'm going to do on that is I'm going to select this one, hold down Shift, and Command select this one. So now it's selected both of those two. Now I'm going to do Shift Command I to invert my selection, and then add the gradient map there. And this one is going to be our magenta. All right, so now we have our 3 gradient maps in place. Now, you can see these gradient maps aren't quite getting the look that we want. They're too muted. So what I want to do is I want to adjust the gradient map. Now to do that, I'm going to click on the gradient map here, and what I want is I want the middle to be more saturated. Now, if I just click here to add an anchor point or a color into this gradient, you'll see what happens. Not what we want. So let's just drag that down to get rid of it. Now what I'm going to do is hold Option and click here, and what it's going to do is it's going to take the color that already exists there and make that the color. So now I can select this color, and in my color picker I can just push it toward a more saturated color. So right about there. I don't want to go overboard, but that looks pretty. And let's do that to this one as well. So Option click in the middle, and then on this color, push it toward a more saturated blue. And finally, this one, Option click, push this a little more toward purple. So I'm going to color up a bit. Good. All right, and I think also we can make this, the dark color here, a little darker and a little more saturated. So let's go ahead and do that for all 3 colors as well. This one, I want to go a little more blue and a little more saturated and a little more dark. That's good. And same for this one. That looks quite nice. Now, one thing you'll notice if you look at the original poster is that there's areas of reflection that go too white. Now, if I tried to do that in the gradient map, it's going to cause problems. And I can show you real quickly. Like, for example, I want the inside of the reflection on his eye and a little bit of this specular highlight to be white. But if I go in here and change my bright spot here to be white, you can see it changes the background, which I don't want. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to cancel that, is I'm going to take my merged layer here, and I'm going to do Command J to make a copy of it, bring it above. I'm going to right mouse click to convert it to a smart object so that I can add filters on top of it. And the first thing I'm going to do is image adjustment black and white. And in here I want to drag the red down, drag the white up. That looks pretty good. And then I'm going to add another adjustment. And this one is a curve. And on the curve, what I want to do is I want to drag the black point down quite a bit so that I'm just getting the whites. And now I want to pull those whites up a little more obvious. So about there. Now I want to black out the background. And I can't do that. I can't paint on a smart object. So how do we get around that? Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a layer on top of it and call this blackout. And then I'm going to clip that to this layer so that this layer only affects this layer. Then I can go on my brush, hit D to make sure I'm black, and then just paint black around here. I do want to leave a little bit of that highlight, but otherwise I want all the edges to be black. I also want this jawline, so I'm going to make my brush a bit smaller just around the jawline so that I have that jawline there. And otherwise I want black. Alright, now I'm going to go back on this layer and change it to screen. Now you can see because this layer here is only affecting this, when I turn it on and off, it's not making the background black. All it's doing is changing what's affecting the white. So you can see there we're just adding white specular highlights to the face. And because this is a smart object, if I feel like I'm putting too much white on there, I can go in here and adjust my curve to have not as much white highlight there. So that's a nice way of keeping your composite non-destructive. So there's pretty good. Let's hit OK. All right, now what I want to do is add a layer underneath the gradient maps and make the whole image a little bit darker. There. Good, and then I also want to add a curve on top to make the dark areas a little bit darker as well. But really I just want to affect the darks. So I'm going to pull my darks down just a little. It's doing a little bit more than I want. So let's do it this way. We're going to pull the darks there and then push it back up so it's not affecting the light areas. And that's quite good. And we can turn that on and off, see how it looks. That looks pretty nice. All right, now I want to add some noise on top of everything. So I'm going to go to Layer, New, Layer. I'm going to change the blending mode to Overlay, and then turn on this, Fill with Overlay Neutral Color, and change the name to Noise or Film Grain. And then I'm going to go to Filter, Noise, Add Noise. Make sure I'm on Gaussian monochromatic, and 12 is fine. Hit OK. And then if we zoom in here, we can see the noise is far too obvious right now. So let's go to Filter again, Blur, and just click on Blur, and then do Command F to make that blur I'm going to hit that a couple times. All right, so there you go. Now we're getting that nice grain. And that's pretty much it on the image itself. So now what I want to do is add the text. So for that, I want to turn my guides back on. I'm going to do Command semicolon. And let's actually take all this and select all these layers. So I've got the top one selected. Go to the very bottom one except for the background. Hold down Shift, select them all, and then do Command G to put them all in a folder, and we'll call this artwork. This is just keeping our file a little bit better organized. All right, now I'm going to go in the Type tool and change my text color to white. I'm going to change, well, I want my font to be Montserrat's semi-bold, and I want the point size to be 35, and I want it centered. And I want the tracking to be on 720. All right, so let's click here, and we're going to type in, "This is the story of a lifetime." Good. All right, let's just zoom in here. If I do Command T, this is kind of a little trick I do. Oftentimes people have this turned on, show transform controls, which kind of allows you to do rotate, scale, and so forth anytime you're on the move tool. To me, this is a bit distracting, so I don't keep that on. And if I do want to see the center or where it is or have a bounding box, I simply do Command T for transform. It essentially does the same thing. And then I can move it around and then just hit enter or double click once I have it in place. So there you go. I want that centered and the baseline on that guide there. All right, next we're going to do T again. This time I want it to be on ultra light, and I want the point size to be 128, and I want the tracking to be 0. And click there, type in Moonlight. Yes, I realize I'm spelling it wrong. All right, and then I'm going to click on bold. Now, I usually never use this because the better way to do it is just change this to, extra light if you want it lighter or regular. But looking at the poster, it's somewhere in between ultralight and light. Like light is too bold and ultralight is too thin. So in this case, I'm going to cheat and just use the fake bold. All right, then I'm going to hit the check mark. This is one of these things where as a designer, I would tell any of my students, don't ever use fake bold. But if you know why you should never use fake bold, then you can break the rules. So only break the rules if you really know the rules and know why you should follow them. All right, let's move that down. Okay, next I'm going to go down here and do an outer glow. And I want that to be kind of this color here. So I can select that and then make it more saturated version of that color. Hit OK. I want the blend mode to be on screen. And the size, this all looks pretty good, 13 pixels. You can see the opacity there. About there looks good. All right, and then we're going to select this inner glow as well. Let's click on that. And on this, I kind of want it to go in a bit. And you can tell I've already set it up. But you want this on multiply, the opacity on 100, and the size to only be about 3 pixels. And that's just going to get that light coming in. And that looks pretty nice. All right, next we're going to add the credits. Now for the credits, it's a lot of text, so I'm going to do a bit of a cheat. Let's go on the T tool. We're going to do this in a font called Movie Poster Regular. And I want the, oh, okay. You want to make sure you don't have a type tool selected when you change this. So to deselect, you can go up here, layer, And somewhere there's a deselect layer right here, deselect layer. But an easier way to do that is if you have a layer selected, just click outside of your layer selection. It'll deselect them. All right, so now we can change this movie poster regular. I'm going to change the font size to 40. And in my character palette, I want to make sure my tracking is on 0. And I want the leading to be 40. Let's try it 30 because I want it really tight. All right, and then we're going to click here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch to text edit where I actually have all the credit text. And I'll include this in the assets for this tutorial. So we'll select all that, go in here, select that, and paste. Now you'll notice that this is on all caps. I don't want it to be all caps, and I definitely don't want the faux bold on there. So let's select all that and turn those two off. And let's go Command T, just make sure that's centered. I want it about there. And I want the opacity to be on about 80. So I'm going to hit 8. Actually, even go down to like 60. So I'm going to hit 6 on the keyboard there. That looks pretty nice. And then finally, we're going to add the little coming soon. So let's deselect our text layer there. Go on T for the text tool. Go on Montserrat. And I want Montserrat regular. And that's going to be 30 point type. And the rest should all be fine. And this I do want all caps, coming soon. And then we're going to put our two little logos just to make this look more official. So I'm going to go place embedded. We're going to have this little B25 logo. Let's put that on the right side there. And let's put that on 60% as well. And I'm going to use my little Nuclei logo here. And that down. And this we're going to put a white color overlay on. And we're going to take the opacity on that down to 60. And now if I hold down Shift when I do the arrow keys, rather than moving it 1 screen pixel, it'll move it 10 screen pixels. So when you're making small adjustments, and you don't want to move it around with the mouse, what you can do is put it basically where you want it and then use keyboard up, down, left, right to adjust the position. If you need to adjust it more, just hold down Shift when you're doing that. Okay, and then we can take all these layers here and put those in a group and call them titling. And then we can turn off our guides with Command semicolon and then Command 0 to fit. And that finishes our poster. There you have it. I hope you enjoyed that tutorial. And if you did, please subscribe to my channel, turn on notifications, and also leave any comments. I really want to know what things you're having trouble with, what questions you have. Also, if there's some poster, book cover, or magazine ad, or image that you've seen that you don't know how to recreate in Photoshop, please put it in the comments. I may make it the subject of my next tutorial. Now, if you want to fast track your training toward becoming a master photo compositor, go to nuclei.com. I have premium courses there which take you through the entire workflow of photo compositing, breaking down all the steps, all the tools, all the filters, the different blending modes, and so forth. Photo compositing is a vital tool. All right, if you're a photographer, if you're a designer, if you're a digital artist, or you want to become one of those 3 things, photo compositing in terms of Photoshop is the most valuable skill you can have. Because if you look at any movie poster, any book cover, any magazine ad, photo compositing makes up at least 70% of all of them. All right, so check out nuclei.com. There's some great training there if you really want to become an efficient, fast, and high quality photo compositor. Also, I used gradient maps in this tutorial to make some duotones. I also have a pack of gradient maps that I highly suggest. I'll put a link for those in the description. You can also use gradient maps not just for duotones like we did here, but gradient maps are really good for color grading. Now, I'll include on one of these two sides a video on how to color grade with gradient maps. I suggest you watch that and check out my gradient map pack. All right, I'll see you next week, and please don't forget to subscribe. It does help. It's how I can keep getting you these videos.